more up close and personal. So we have 1 hour. And in that hour, we're going to focus a bit on elements of effective collaboration and creativity. This is another topic for which I believe they sent you the handout. So the first part of it, you're not going to need it. But what I do need us to do is to be arranged in groups that are no larger than 6 for the first part of the activity. Then you can reconfigure. So if you see a table that has less than 6, it would be great if you could join them. If you have 6, you're perfect as is.
What page is it on? You know what page it's on?
That is its own handout that they would have, instructional services would have sent you. There were 2. One for the keynote, one for the These people need free over here. Just the first part, then you can get up close. Thank you, Mike.
We're becoming a real school, you know.
Let's work with some different signals. If you're able to put one arm up in the air, would you please do so? If you were able to raise one of your arms up into the air, would you please do so? Great. So I'm going to need to get your attention. Right now, the microphone isn't working, so it's big voice. But you can help me, because if you hear me say, signal on, if you would put your arm in the air, that should be a prompt for us to stop speaking, come back together as a group. There is another signal that I like to use that requires you to finish a phrase. And some of you know this from prior workshops. How does this phrase end? Goodness gracious.
Great balls of fire.
If you hear me say, goodness gracious, you must respond with enthusiasm, great balls of fire. And do not forget the enthusiasm. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. All right, now they told me this group was going to be the better of the 2 afternoon groups. Is that true? All right. At your table, signal on. Thank you. At your table, with the person who is physically seated furthest from me, pick up the envelope that is on the table. Do not open it, you just fold it.
Pick it up.
And signal on. Signal on. So, I appreciate your cooperation because it's a short period of time for us to do this. But I actually think you'll have a little bit of fun with this first activity. So in a minute, when Simon says go, I would like the person holding the envelope to open it and then to reach inside. You will feel pieces of paper. There are 6 clues in each envelope. The person who opens it just reaches in, you don't look for it, you read it, you just pull it out. Pull one out and pass the envelope to your right. Keep passing it until all clues have been removed. If you have a group of 6, then obviously everyone will have a clue. If you have a smaller group, then you keep passing it. Some members of your group may have more than one clue. Very important. Alright. I appreciate the way you guys are listening to the direction. So, once all 6 clues are out, the person who first pulled the clue, you will read yours to your group. A lot of people in here, so use your indoor voices just above the listener in your group. You may never give someone your clue to read, nor may you ever read someone else's clue. But you are going to go around the table with everyone sharing verbally their clue. Please read everything that's on the piece of paper. The only time people have been unable to complete this is when someone made an assumption something on their paper was on everybody else's. So you're going to read it, you can reread it as many times as is necessary. Then your job is to figure out what is the task. The task directions are in those clues. Once you've figured out what it is, do it. And when you think you have completely, accurately completed this task, then I want you to process, right on the back of the envelope, what are the things you had to do to be successful in doing this. It takes people typically 12 minutes to be able to do this.
Our group.
So, let us
Get a chair, be part of our group.
review this. Don't start yet. Open the envelope. Pass out the clues to your group.
Take it through.
Don't share. Don't
Take it
share.
through and don't share it. Goal is to read the clues, figure out the task, and then take the clue. So we each have a clue. We're all supposed to read the clue. We're not supposed to start. We got their clue. Yes. Here's the first one. The title on mine is Largest City in 1990. Largest City in 1990. Seoul, home of the longest
Population is 11.5. Larger than both Seoul and Windsor. Smaller than Mexico City has the largest population in the province.
First show, please report to the office. First show, please report.
Mexico
Five largest, so it's 5 years of the largest population in the largest Mexico, Tokyo, Calcutta, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, New York, but not necessarily. Not about short river Falcon videos on Seoul,
Only two cities in 1990 with a greater population in Tokyo, so Mexico City and Sao Paulo. After all of your
So Tokyo, there's got to be 3 in between Sao Paulo and Shanghai.
But they said Mexico City has the most.
So Mexico City, and then Sao Paulo, number second.
Do we know that they're in that order?
Well, if it's only those two, then it's got to
Right,
be.
but do we know it's
Yeah, because it's and then Tokyo has two ahead of it, which are Mexico City and Sao Paulo. That puts Sao Paulo number two.
okay? So if we get the top five, we've got Calcutta. Do we know that it's one?
I think it's the back of
New York's four, we know that because
You're right.
because there was a clue that said not yet.
Okay, now I've got one. Rio is smaller than
We have a different one for Shanghai. We already had Mexico City. Oh, got it. New York is four. Calcutta's five. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, because I have Buenos Aires is more than Seoul. First clue, so, no problem. Yes. Definitely.
Rio de Janeiro was the 10th largest city in the world.
Bombay, population 11.9, largest.
Dubai is 11.9. Shanghai is right down here. Those three are in between. Sao Paulo.
Dodgers win. We are the champions.
We're done.
But I have the top five, and Calcutta's included in the top five. Tail cutter. Sorry, my name tag fell off. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. No. Otherwise, yeah.
And signal on. Signal on.
Thank you. Okay. I saw a whole bunch of tables. with their hands go up. So if you believe you've got the correct order, then don't forget the last part of your task. To write down on that envelope the things you had to say or do to successfully complete the task. Don't be vague and just say we have to collaborate. What did it look like? What did it sound like? Okay, and you're still working on it. You got about 10
Yes, we had to listen to each other.
Listen, organize, arrange, respect each other,
Everything, I guess that district.
Going back to that line, we hypothesize and check.
Very hands-on, aesthetic.
I said we were good. Back and check that information.
I know that. I didn't know that.
You ever fly into there? Like the city.
Everything else.
and finish up that thought. Goodness gracious. That was a good response, but then we have to like stop talking. All right. So, what was the task? What was the task you were given?
Order the top 10 cities with population from 1990.
Thank you. So based on the 1990 census, to put the 10 largest cities at that time in order from largest to smallest. So, what's the largest?
Mexico City,
Next.
Sao Paulo,
Next.
Tokyo,
Next.
New York,
Next.
Calcutta,
Next.
Shanghai,
Next.
Bombay,
Next.
Buenos Aires,
Next. Seoul. And
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio, 19.
out of curiosity, how many of you have ever been to Mexico City? Thank you. Sao Paulo. Thank you. Tokyo. Thank you. New York. Calcutta. Shanghai. Mumbai. Bombay. Buenos Aires. Seoul. Rio. Good travelers. So, raise your hand and wait to be called upon. If you can give me an attribute, an action that you had to take in order to successfully complete this task. Raise your hand and tell me something that's on your list. Please wait to be called upon. Tell me what. Okay, you had to listen to one another. Yes, sir.
Take notes.
All right, you had to have a strategy. Take notes, yes.
You're all focused on winning.
Oh, you're all focused on winning. That's amazing. Get some of the people in your group. All right, something else. Yes, sir. All right, you created a graphic organizer, so way to organize the organization. You disobeyed. You cheated? Yes, sir.
Assign someone to write down.
All right, so they assigned roles in their group.
We made manipulatives.
This group made manipulatives. So they made pieces of paper where they could write the names of the cities and move them around so everyone could see the information at the same time. Anything else you had to do? Yes. You had to reread. That it. So you have most of what I typically hear, but here are the things that come up. We had to listen, we had to collaborate, we had to ask for repetition, right? Sometimes we needed the information more than once. You had to eliminate non-relevant information, even though in your group you tried to eliminate people. But, right? But it's non-relevant information. You had to figure out the task. You had to take turns. Everybody had to contribute, correct? Or you wouldn't have succeeded. You had to come to some agreement. You were engaged in problem solving, reasoning. You had to invite sometimes others to participate again. You had to have strategies to organize your data. So some people had one person writing, some had multiple, some created a graphic organizer, some created manipulatives. Sometimes people will have a conversation about, okay, now that we know what the task is, how do we want to approach it? More often than not, people just kind of jump in, right? Some of you assigned roles, some people just take on roles in groups. And typically you've got a leader, a recorder, the person maybe checking everybody's understanding or agreement. So, nicely done. And now my question is that, this morning I was talking a bit about cooperative group learning. Was that cooperative group learning? How many of you think it was? How many of you think it was not? And that means the rest of you have given up thinking for the day. All right, you work hard, you cannot. All right, if you have your handout available to you, you would see something that I touched upon a little bit in the morning session. And the acronym PIGSPACE is there to help us remember the critical elements of cooperative group learning, which happen to be the same critical elements of adult collaborative planning. Now, in your packet, on numbered page 1, I'm sharing some of the research results that I addressed this morning about what happens when kids work in cooperative learning groups compared to competitive or individualistic. And then on page 2, you have an advanced organizer, a graphic organizer, that looks at the critical elements of PIGSPACE. I wanted to have us analyze the experience you just went through in terms of, was it really a real cooperative learning group? And then I want to transition to adult collaborative planning. Because as I said, it is the same 5 critical elements that make our adult collaboration effective and/or our student cooperative group learning. If you are interested in cooperative group learning, as I said this morning, you can go to my website, there's handouts, there's a guided plan tool. So it'll be impossible to develop it without these 5 things being in place. There also is a topical area on collaborative planning, collaborative teaming for adult teams. So there are a lot of resources available to you, and as I said this morning, you're welcome to everything, right? You don't need additional permission to take, use, copy. You can even claim you authored it for all I care. What I want us to do, though, is to analyze your experience. So it is a cooperative learning group if and only if all 5 elements are in place. So let's start with the P in PIGSPACE, which is about positive interdependence. It is the essence of social interaction. It is creating that sense of we can swim, but only if we all swim. We're either going to sink or swim together. That motto of the 3 Musketeers. There are at least 9 different ways that you can structure positive interdependence into your student cooperative group learning and into your adult collaborative teaming. If you've got your handout accessible, on the next page you have the 9 ways that we structure positive interdependence. If you don't, you can rely upon the screen. So I'd like you in your table group to read those 3 ways and decide if that kind of interdependence was built into the city's activity. So for example, goal. Were you goal interdependent? As a group, did you have common purpose? There was one product and you couldn't achieve unless everybody achieved. Is that true? Yeah. So you had one kind of interdependence. Read the other 2, decide if they were present or not.
Figure out what at first we didn't know exactly what it was. Let's figure out.
So that we didn't have any differences. There was no,
everybody had the same.
They go on. I like the way these people are seated, silent, looking at the presenter and ready to begin. Thank you. Did you feel that there was an incentive that could only be attained if you all got it together? Was there an incentive that made you work together?
We needed M&Ms.
You wanted M&Ms. Some of you just assumed there was an incentive. But when you finished, you said, what's our prize? Because we were the first group done. Well, from my point of view, you all can pick one of those cities on that list and ask the district to buy you a ticket for vacation. All right? So, I don't think it was strongly built in, right? But it could easily have been added. So when we think about students in cooperative learning groups, sometimes people will have them work and study together, and then the next day they take individual assessments. And you get your own grade, and you get the average of your group members' grades. In some communities, highly competitive, that might not go over so well. So what you would probably do instead is bonus points. So you're going to get your own grade and you'll get bonus points if every member of your group is able to achieve whatever it is. Or some other incentive. How about resource interdependence? Were you resource interdependent? Sure. We had those materials so that you had to communicate, you had to share. This is good for the student who rushes to accomplishment, maybe doesn't like to work with others. If they don't have all the information, then they've got to communicate, collaborate with those other students. So we know you had goal interdependence and you had resource interdependence. Analyze in terms of these three strategies for interdependence with your group. Were they present?
We each had to read.
Which was good because it gave everyone a chance to hear.
You want to sign that? In a way, each I tried to. No, don't cheat, don't cheat. We could do a deconstructed physics problem this way. Tails are just worked out. They got to figure out what to do. Hey, would our outside force be time? You're advanced. You're working
And finish up that box. Thank you. Were you role interdependent? Yes and no. Can you explain that?
Yes, we all had a role in reading, but we didn't have formalized roles as far as leader, reporter, we all just started out.
Beautiful. So, yes, and you all had the same role that was assigned, and that was to share your information, right? However, what you're referencing is oftentimes within cooperative groups, we can assign a whole host of roles. From the reader, the reporter, the presenter, the illustrator, there is no limit to those roles, right? But you have to make a decision as to which student is going to perform which of those roles in that group. So I would say you were role interdependent, but we can certainly tighten it. If you go to my website and you get the handout on cooperative learning, there are a whole host of roles that students can take in the job description of what that person does that you can use. Were you sequence interdependent? did you have to follow a particular sequence? Right? I mean, you couldn't talk about what did you do to be successful until you had, you had to initially read. You couldn't have gone on. Then you had to figure out what the task was. Then you had to share. Then you had to process. What did you do to be successful? So I would say you were sequencing to dependencies. Simulation was not built into this. You know, that's one of those like you're on a desert island and you've got these things. Let's look at the last three.
What's that?
Outside enemy. Some of you created that on your own because you were out to meet the other people, right?
Yeah.
But you know what's always an outside enemy? Time. Time. Right? As a teacher, I never really wanted to foster much of that sense of competition, intergroup competition in the room. I didn't mind having them compete against a different classroom, or I always had them competing against my mythical, up until now, the best class I ever had, they were able to, I wonder if you can beat them, right? Were you environmentally interdependent?
We're sitting at the same table.
You're in this seating arrangement, you're near each other, you've got these materials, and identity wasn't present, right? That's for groups that are going to be together for a longer time. So they create an identity. They have flags, mottos, they come up with songs, whatever it is. Remember, it is not a real cooperative learning group unless at least one way is built in. The more ways you structure positive independence, the more likely they are going to work together, become a cohesive group. In a classroom, some groups you may need to structure more interdependence for that group than you may for the other groups. So we got the P of Pig Space. The I in Pig Space is about individual accountability. And I believe I said this in the morning. This is the #1 complaint about cooperative group learning. One child did all the work, everybody put their name on it. That is not cooperative group learning because the teacher didn't assure the presence of individual accountability. The students need to know before they begin when they will be held accountable, how they will be held accountable, right? And what they will be held accountable for. Here we can differentiate again because what I'm holding this group accountable for may be different than this group, or certain individuals within a group. But regardless, you need to know what you're held accountable for, when, and how. Was individual accountability built into this activity? Anybody think it was? Yes, sir. So, did I as a teacher say something where you thought I was going to hold you individually accountable? Not directly, but the way it was structured, you were accountable to the members of your group, and they would hold you accountable, right? That's one way. But we can hold students accountable. Today you're working on this as a group, and tomorrow we're going to assess you individually. And you know that. That's accountability. I can randomly call on members of a group to present or to share or to answer something. I could go around and collect anecdotal information while you're working in a group. I could have you work, but say I'm going to take one paper, create that, you'll all get the same grade. So now I've fostered more interdependence as well as everybody's like, well, it might be me that gets called on, or it's my product sample. As with every dimension, we can individualize and differentiate what we hold them accountable for, when, and how. So I would say that you had positive independence and there was some individual accountability built into it. So we have a P and an I of Pig Space. G, group processing. We all get better with feedback. When students work in groups, we want them to process because they have two tasks. Get the job done, task. Build and maintain good working relationship, task and relationship. Oftentimes students hear us say, collaborate, social skills, do these things, but they don't really believe us. Because when we process with them, we process just the academic task. and we don't focus on the social skills, the interpersonal skills. So we know what's respected by what we expect and then inspect. If we don't inspect those collaborative skills, they learn they're really not important. So there's a sample there of a way to process, which is very simple. What are 3 things we did really well? What's 1 thing we could do even better next time? In the handout on the website, I have a couple of pages of different ways that you can process, and the students can, because otherwise it gets boring if you're just going to do that every time. Was there group processing built into your city's activity? What do you think, ma'am? You don't know? That's an honest answer. You guys are honest. We won, but we cheated. I don't know. You know? All right, it's good quality. But did you process as a group? Sure. You're saying yes. Where and when? How?
Yeah.
How?
We had to share our cards, and then we had to compare information to arrange them in a specific way.
All right, so you're back to, this is how we kind of did the activity. Anybody else have something to add to that about your processing as a group? Yes.
Well, once we started our list, we were all staring at it and going, move this here, move that there.
All right, so you were processing the academic tasks.
Yeah.
Successful. Good job.
All right, they gave each other feedback. They were complimenting one another. Good job, we're better than them. What was the last thing you had to do to be successful in completing that task? There you go. Say that again. And you sing us a song.
We reflected on the process.
Did you not have to list these are the things that allowed us to successfully complete this task? So as a group, you were processing. If you look at your list, some of the things on your list allowed you to get the task done. Some of them helped you work good, the collaborative, the social skills. So I would say you've got a P, an I, and a G. The S in Take Space is about social skills, collaborative skills. And so what we know about our collaborative social skills is that all teams, groups, or committees go through 4 stages of development. So it's important sometimes to think about how long we keep students working together. Your first stage, by the way, these 4 stages are represented with 4 F words that we can say in public school. The first one is about forming. You come together, you form as a group. When we form, this is establishing trust. Then we begin to function. And when we're functioning, we are focused on both our task and our relationship or social skills areas. You know that it's happening when there's communication. We're attending to the verbal communication, the body language. We're distributing leadership. Not everyone does everything. Right? We're engaged in together, decision making. Your third stage of group development is formulating. It's here where we engage in creative problem solving. The final stage is fermenting. And it takes like a fine, how long does it take to find wine before it's ready for you to drink it?
2 minutes.
And once again, honest answer. Depends on the variety. Well, here's how I messed that up.
It's ready. Can we open it now?
Now this is before I met any of you, but there was a 3-day series of a workshop. And in came this woman who was very attractive, and she sat right up front. And up until that point in my life, she's probably the most elegant person that I'd ever seen come to any training that I was doing. And I couldn't get her to participate though. So if I asked a question, gave think time, and maybe called on her, she'd go. If I put people in a partner or group, she'd leave. But she came day 2, you know, came day 3. So day 3, we're talking about this in terms of adult collaboration. And I said, how long does it take to find red wine before it's ready for you to drink it? And her hands went up in the air. And I was like, whoo, be still my heart. So I ran right on over. And I'm like, how long? And she looked at me and she said, oh, an hour or 2. Here I heard a couple minutes, but have you ever spoken too fast before the sensor works? So when she said that, the censor had no time, and I just looked at her, I said, why do you wait that long? Why not halfway between the liquor store and your car? That was the end of her participation. And then to make it worse, that night I'm thinking about her and I'm saying, you know, she's probably used to drinking some really fine red wine. And duh, I'll bet she's talking about the time from when you take the cork out, you let it breathe, you know, an hour or two. So, why am I talking to you about wine at this hour of the day? Get closer.
5:30 somewhere.
The reason I'm talking about wine is because the stage is known as fermenting. And just as it takes a fine red wine time to reach the fermenting stage, it takes our teams, be they student or adult. How do you know you're here? There is constructive controversy, right? We build in these situations where the kids are going to have different ideas, different perspectives, different answers, and they've got to engage in constructive controversy. So, in the packet, there are a variety of social skills checklists. What this one does is kind of take you through those 4 F words and what are some of the social skills that would be exhibited in our establishing trust. Distributing leadership, being creative problem solvers, engaged in constructive controversy. But I have a variety of lists and sample lesson plans where they taught students the social skills. So, did you have to focus a bit on social skills in your city's activity? You told me we had to listen, we had to take turns. So social skills were built into it. And if you look at your process list, what did we have to do? Some of those were behaviors that help with the task, some were about social skills, collaborative skills. That gets us to the last element, face-to-face. Group size. What's your favorite group size? Students are working together. 2, 3, 4. All right, 2, 3, 4 or more. It has to be at least 2 to be called a group. And the student cooperative group learning literature says when you get to 6, you're really pushing the limits, right? So 2 to 6, but what I hear most often from teachers is 4s. You should, for the most part, determine who's going to work with whom. As I said earlier today, left alone, like chooses like. And the most powerful cooperative learning groups are comprised with students who have different ability, different background, whatever. In the ideal world, in a group of 4, you have 1 high achiever, 2 kids kind of in the middle, maybe 1 who's struggling a little bit. And good luck with that, comprising that in the ideal world. Because our classrooms are often not ideal compositions. Then you can go for variety of multiple intelligences. You can look at various interests they might have, right? Of course, you have to think of the social dynamics. So, for the most part, it is a teacher's job to organize those kids into cooperative learning groups. So, that brings us to a bit of an overview, and then I want to just touch on the teacher decisions. We've got 3 different ways we can organize the learning environment: cooperative, competitive, and individualistic. The research is really strong. If we do it well, cooperative yields better results. If we're going to do cooperative, all 5 elements have to be in place. And that was, they were all present to a degree in your city's activity. The teacher has to structure in the positive interdependence. And there is a host of roles, decisions that the teacher has to make. In your packet, if you look at it on numbered page 7, you've got the teacher's role. So there are decisions that need to be made before you do the cooperative group learning. What academic, social skill objectives, group size, how do you assign your students to groups, how are you going to arrange the room, materials. Then before they begin the task, which I didn't set this as well as I wanted to before we started, but you want to make sure they understand how they're positively interdependent. What the academic task is, well, for you it was to figure it out. What the criteria for success is. before they start? How, when are you going to hold them accountable? Are there certain social skills? Are you going to actually teach the social skills before they begin? Many classrooms, you may see a T-chart for the social skills they're working on. And the T-chart, one side is what does it look like? What does it sound like? Tribes, which was popular in middle schools for a long time, has what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like when we do these things? So you can remind your students of it. Then you get to monitoring and intervening. The basic rule here is when you feel like intervening, try not to. If you have to, do it with a question that turns it back to the group, get out of the way, monitor from a distance, and then come over. I'm not saying if no one in the group understands something, you don't provide task assistance. But I have literally heard students say to other students, stop thinking, you know they're gonna come over and tell us, right? So, or I've heard many a teacher, including myself, years ago say, oh, you're in a group of 4, ask 3 before me. But they didn't do it. It's easier, just ask the teacher. And then I'll come over here and actually end up in a conversation with one that is taking away the dynamic. So I moved to partner hands if there were 2, or table hands if they were a group. If you have a question, I will come to your group. However, you must ask every other member of your group before me. I will know that you have done that because everyone's hand will be in the air. And when I can come over, I can call on anybody in the group to say, what's the question? All of a sudden, I have a lot more asking of peers. When they work in a group, sometimes we as teachers get lonely. No one's heard me. They don't know how important I am, so let me interject. The power is that they are talking to each other. You should be collecting anecdotal information, data, as what you're observing and hearing. The last part of it is to process the end of the work, making sure that you're giving them feedback on the academics and the social skills. Sometimes our students themselves maybe are self-evaluating their collaborative behavior as well as academics. Good cooperative group members are not born, they're made. And you know, the Johnson brothers, one of the authors in cooperative group learning, say you can take a teacher up to 60 lessons, implement, plans implemented and reflecting upon, before they get from the declarative knowledge of this is what cooperative group learning is, to the procedural, how do I set up, to the conditional, what do I do under this condition. If you go to the website, there are sample lesson plans, the short form, but there's also the long form, which will take you through that guided activity. So the short answer to, was the city's activity a real cooperative group learning activity, is yes, because all 5 elements of PigSpace were present. That's our short form. So, what about application of PigSpace to adult collaborative teams? If you have your handout, we would be on page 12. You can structure interdependence among adults in many of the same ways you do students. Having a common goal for us to discuss, why do we exist as a team, creates a sense of interdependence. Distributing leadership. Leadership in cooperative group learning is different than it is in other kinds of configurations. Because in collaborative teaming. In adult collaborative teaming, leadership is defined as any action that you take that helps the group get the task done and build and maintain good working relationship. So you always have 2 jobs, task and relationship. I'll bet you've encountered people in your life that are very task-oriented and then the relationships suffer. People who are very relationship-oriented and the task is never achieved. So it is that balance. We create positive independence with adults just as we do with students by having various roles. Our belief, and here are some of those sample roles, and you have these on pages 13 through 15 of your handout. Some of them are very common ones. Timekeeper, right, recorder. You might have some that are new. Jargon buster. Have you ever been in a meeting where people use jargon and you don't know what they're talking about?
Never.
Do you always want to raise your hand in front of everybody? and say, I haven't got a clue what the hell you're talking about?
Always.
That a girl. All right. And there are many people, though, who don't want to do that. So we will sometimes assign a person the role of jargon buster. And they're not saying they don't know that term or acronym, they're saying someone may not know that. When we do brainstorming, we often have butt watchers with one tip. They're watching during the brainstorming that people don't do the yeah but, that won't work kind of things. So we can also create a sense of independence if we're focused on common reward, right? We're meeting to problem solve around this child. Common reward would be that child's success. Sometimes the administration provides incentives to facilitate collaboration, like time, for people to meet, plan, be reflective. We believe that you should start every meeting with positives related to why you exist as a team. So when we begin the meeting, we would quickly go around the room. Everyone would contribute a positive related to why we're there, what our purpose is. You create that positive independence by having roles, and we like our teams to rotate the roles. So yeah, today I'm the reporter. Oh, but we like it when you report. It's legible, everybody agrees. My job is to say thank you. I agree that I have fine-tuned my skills in this area, and I do not wish to deprive you of a growth opportunity. We see this as a capacity-building model. What is it that we would hold each other accountable for? The I in pig space. A lot of our adult collaborative teams establish ground rules, norms of behavior. If I were on a team, one that I would always suggest is we will start on time, we will end on time. If someone comes in late, we welcome them, but we don't jump back to the beginning. Have you been at the meeting where you rehash it again and again and again? If we agree that that's a norm, and Leslie comes to the meeting late again,
I'm always on time.
you're always on time? And then Kathy says, we're really glad you're here. We're on item 5. But then Trish says, oh yeah, but you should have heard the great idea that Ernest had for number 1. We've established this norm. Any member of our team can say, that's nice, you want to catch her up. But remember, we agreed that doesn't happen in the meeting, it'll happen after with a buddy system. It's more palatable to be held accountable if you've agreed what the norms or the ground rules are. We want to hold people accountable for doing their roles. So Ms. Timely here, Ms. Timely, would you put your left arm up near me? Now what is missing from her left arm that many people might have there? A watch. So she's our timekeeper, and those of you who really know her, she's kind of time. So we want to hold her accountable. Being held accountable is not taking her job away. Being held accountable is prompting her to do her job. How are we doing for time? How much time is left? Do you want to borrow his watch for the meeting? Right? This one to me is important. Do you think a good team is a team without conflict? How many of you think a good team is a team without conflict? Why do teams exist? They exist to solve problems, address challenges. A team without conflict is either unnecessary or lazy. I'm not saying that you want the conflict between the personalities, but we actually should have conflict and proposed ideas, different solutions, different perspectives. That gets us into creative problem solving, right? So are we holding each other accountable? Do we as a group also process in terms of our functioning? Here, and you have this on page 17, are a list of behaviors that help us get our tasks done when we work together on a team. And here are things that help us work together, social skills, develop relationships. This model of adult collaboration is generic. It can apply to any kind of adult teaming configuration, departmental, grade level, meetings about students, etc. So we might simply look through here and say, which of these things are we doing? Which of these things do we want to try to do that we've not been paying attention to? We'd be processing as a group. Some of our teams create checklists, and oftentimes these same kinds of checklists are given to kids, and they check off the things they feel that they're doing that helps them achieve the task and build relationship. They set goals with one another. And it's the same stages of social skills development for us, the 4 F words, as adults. And there's that wine, we're getting closer yet, right? At the fermenting stage. What's the best physical arrangement for you when you're collaborating with people? What's your best physical arrangement? Sitting how? Back to back?
With the wine.
Well, we are going to personalize and differentiate. So. Maintain sense of humor is important.
I saw it.
Yeah, and you saw it under functioning. Very important. What is the best physical arrangement if you're collaborating? Sitting in a circle. More than 2/3 of all communication is nonverbal. We don't arrange ourselves so we can see each other, and the nonverbal body language as well. We miss the vast amount of communication. So we've got to think about group size too. Anyone remember what I told you the research says was the largest group size for kids? 6. There's a lot of adult literature that says 6 to 7 is the largest effective group size that you can get for adults. There is some other literature that says you can have up to 10 adults at a team if they all have very good social skills and if they remember to use the social skills. 2 big ifs. The more structure and processes you put in place, then you can have more people. When you have the roles, you have structured agenda format. So our time is just about done. But again, if you go to the website under, I can do that. That'll be our last.
This is much more helpful than this one.
Hello. All right. So if you go to the website and you go at the top on the menu bar, you go to presentations. Then it's going to give you topical areas. So in terms of this morning, top row there, co-teaching. If you click on co-teaching, it takes you to the various handouts and other resources. If you go to, a lot of what we did today would also be under differentiation. But here's your adult collaborative teaming. There's an entire article from one of our books taking that adult collaborative teaming fixed-based process and describing it. The cooperative group learning for students. Hello. Here. The cooperative group learning would be there. So, big topic, short time. But it's the same 5 elements. So, thank you guys for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.